Hi guys, my name is Hunter and I'm going to be talking to you about a substance that I have done before and I've done many times, and now I want to talk about it because I've had a lot of time to reflect on the substance I took and the experiences I've had with it. So it's going to be about magic mushrooms, and it's going to have some pretty interesting content inside the video. So heads up, if you do not want to hear about drugs, then don't listen to this. But here we go. So magic mushrooms was one of the only drugs I've ever taken in my life. I'm only 20 right now. I'm not going to say where I took them, but one thing I do want to say is that magic mushrooms are still illegal in many parts of the world. So if you're going to end up partaking in this substance, be careful on where you're taking it and also how much you take. So if it's illegal where you live, I don't condone taking it there. But anyway, so they're becoming legal in certain places. For example, Canada last year has legalized the substance, and now it's being bought and sold. Also in Oakland, California, this year, in 2019, it's been decriminalized as a substance that can be possessed but cannot be sold or distributed still. So you can now grow them or possess them without getting into any legal trouble in Oakland, California, and Denver, Colorado. So that's now 2 cities in the United States that are starting to change their laws about this specific substance. Now there's research being done right now at the Johns Hopkins College, and I believe that's in Boston, and as well as the New York University of Medicine, and they are testing this substance, these psilocybin mushrooms, on these cancer-treated patients that have a year or less of life expectancy. So what they are saying is that these psilocybin-filled mushrooms are able to help with people who have PTSD or who have depression-like symptoms. For example, the reason why they are using it on these cancer-treated patients is because these patients have a life expectancy of a year or less to live. So now they're trying to see if this substance is able to help people who have a gloomy, sad future to look forward to. So right now what I do know is what's going on is phase 1 was completed by the DEA and the FDA in 2011, and that was on a very, very small specific group of cancer-treated patients, and they had an overall across the board positive result from the research they were doing. So they went to phase 2, which is actually being done now on a bigger group of people, but there's also larger doses of the psilocybin being administered to people, and it's a double-blind, double-something test where it's being, the researchers themselves are not even knowing which is psilocybin and what they're administering. They don't even know if they're administering psilocybin or the placebo. So that's how it's a good test, is the researchers themselves aren't being told what they are. So there's no bias when it comes to knowledge of what the patients are being administered. Anyway, to continue on, these shrooms is what people call them. When I first started taking them, I've taken them 30 times so far. When I first started taking them, the first night was a really, really good night. The average dose is anywhere between 1 gram and 3.5 grams. And depending on the size of your body and the weight these stupid flies keep flying, so sorry guys. But anyway, depending on your body weight is dependent upon how much you should probably take for the standard dose. I do want to warn you and say that if you do take too much, you might actually have some problems, and I don't know to what extent those problems can be. So, because I was always very, very, very careful when I took them. So, nobody's ever been known to die from this substance, but people have had some problems by taking very large amounts. That is not average. And then also, if they have some sort of disorder in their brain, I guess it's not the best substance to take at all if you have problems. But anyway, when I took the shrooms, there was one night when I took them and I had thrown a party at my house and we had finished and my best friends were still over, and one of my best friends threw like a pretend kind of play fight punch at me, and I thought it would be time to just have fun and throw one right back at him. And so we got into a stance similar to almost as if you were about to have like a karate match. So we were a little bit apart from each other, but we started to play fight. And while I was on these shrooms, time seemed to be a little bit slowed down for me. So when I saw him throw a punch at me, I could see as he was punching me, trying to punch me, I could see it happening at a slower motion, almost as if you were watching a video and you put the video to slow-mo. So I had more time to react because I saw it happening before he actually got finished punching me. So when I saw him punching and with which hand in what direction, I dodged his punch and I threw one right back at him just as fast as he had thrown one at me. But because I had more time to think about what was happening, I actually got him pretty good in 3 different areas, and I had him down on the ground within probably 5 or 10 seconds, and everybody in the room went like, whoa, like what the heck? And they saw him on the ground and he said, okay, it's over, whatever. So when I remember that night, that was like one of the biggest interesting things I've seen with these psilocybin mushrooms, is that it was something I used to my advantage at the time, so it was very surprising. But also, one more thing is like benefit-wise, something that I saw out of the 30 times I took them was synesthesia. It's when you see things but they're not actually happening, but it's like, for example, when I was listening to loud music with a very big speaker in my house, I was on them another night and I saw waves coming out of the speaker, almost like the music was alive. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but you would never see this normally. And so it was just really interesting to see that the music was alive, I guess. It's not really alive, but it was an eye-opening experience. So one more thing is, like, it lasts on average 4 to 6 hours. So while it's lasting and happening, you're awake and you can't sleep while it is happening. So while I was awake, I never felt tired during the experience, but towards the end, as I was coming down, I felt really, really exhausted. And this was the time for me to go to bed anyway, so I guess that's the only come down that I ever saw from this drug. So when I'm thinking about like alcohol, you always feel, not always, but sometimes you get the day you wake up and you've got the hangover, and that right there is a poison to the body because you don't want to do anything. You have a headache and you're not feeling good at all because of the damage that the alcohol has done to you. And many other drugs do the exact same thing, similar to withdrawals. So there's no withdrawals for psilocybin natural magic mushrooms. which is one cool thing that I like about this drug. When I'm thinking, everything's deeper, on a deeper level. For example, anything that was happening in my life was thought of on a deeper level. So I started thinking about the good things that were happening in my life, the bad things that were happening in my life, what I wanted to change in my life that wasn't being done, that I really wanted to be done. That was also thought of on a deeper level. And you can normally think about those things, but this was something that forced me to go into these deeper thoughts. So I like that because I'm a thinker kind of person, and I like to learn about myself or learn about others around me. So that's why I would take this specific drug around people, is so I can get a sense and a feeling of being connected and around others rather than just by myself. So I'm looking at a little piece of paper so I can definitely like keep on track and see what I want to do. Talk about. So there's this other thing called microdosing. It's taking a tenth or even less than a tenth of the average dose. So now that my dose has been increased because I have a, I've built up to this point, I have a tolerance to it. So I have to take 4 or 5 grams now just to feel the psilocybin mushrooms and the trip. So I'd say about 0.4 or 0.5 of a gram is a tenth of that that I would take to feel the microdose. So it's not any hallucinating, it's not anything crazy, it's just a portion of what I would normally take to get some sort of feeling or benefit or change to my everyday. And so microdosing is something you do every 3 or 4 days if you were to microdose. And how I started to try this out is people say that microdosing is actually good for you and it helps you with how you see life during the day and also how you perform on tests, on anything you do. So I was interested and I wanted to experiment that on myself. So what I did was I was going to a college and I wanted to take it before a test. And so I took it the night before and I did much better on the second test than I did on the first test 2 months prior. So I'm not going to say that it's a cause of these mushrooms that I did better, but I'm going to say there is a correlation that I saw because there was a 13% increase from the first test to the second test. The first one I got a 61% on, and the second one I got a 74% on. So I'm not the best test taker, and I'm not perfect when it comes to school. So that's why this definitely was something I wanted to see if it worked, because I needed a little bit of help. So I tried it on the third test during the test, and I was high on this microdosing of the shrooms during the third test, and I got a 64 on it or something. So I did not do very well on that third test, and I realized that in my case, taking this drug while I was trying to do something was not helpful at all. So that's one thing I experimented. One thing is I had for one of my math classes, I had a math project to do, or a quiz to take, and I had to memorize a certain pattern, and I had to memorize like 3 different steps of this formula, but each step had a couple things I had to remember, and the first and the third step were very, very similar when it came to the things I had to remember about each step. So that's why I wanted to remember them in order. And the night before I had this quiz, I spent 30 minutes trying to memorize this pattern for this project, and none of it was clicking with me. So I wanted to see if the microdosing of these mushrooms would help. So I ended up taking half a gram, and I took a giant cap, so it kind of messed up the microdosing. But 30 minutes after starting to have the shrooms inside, I connected within probably I took about 5 minutes to look at it one more time, but once I was on them, everything connected like really, really easily. So I personally believe that this helped me during that quiz. And the next day I came to go take the quiz and I didn't have my computer with me, and it turned out that the computer was the only way we were able to take the quiz. So I actually got a 0 on it at the end of the day anyway, but I had remembered everything that I had done the night before. So it wasn't like my memory was wiped away or anything the next day. I still remembered everything. So that was an interesting thing to me. One thing when I'm talking about doses is when you're taking anything, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, drugs, psilocybin mushrooms, food, anything in life should be only taken in moderation. So when you're talking about the dose size, when you're going upwards to 3.5 grams or more, you're talking about a larger than normal dose. And that is one reason why some people take them and they take the wrong dose and they take too much and they have a bad trip, is what they call it, bad trip, and they never want to do it again, or it scares them. So that's one problem that there is today, is there's not very much research done on them. There's ongoing research, but not enough. And the right dose is not very clear to people about how much they should take. So, and everybody's body works differently. So I took 2 grams my first night and I worked my way up. It's almost like taking espresso. You should not take more than 6 shots or 400 milligrams of espresso a day. If you start to take more, I'm not going to say what can happen, but all I got to say is there was once where somebody took 2 Red Bulls in a day and he died. So all I got to say is be very careful when it comes to dosage. So one cool thing about the benefits of these shrooms is that it keeps you awake the whole time, like I said. So I've never done cocaine. I don't know what cocaine is like, but I have an idea. I know what the drug does, and it keeps you awake. So shrooms do the exact same thing when it comes to keeping you awake. So that is one thing that you get as a benefit, is that you cannot sleep while you're on them. Until that come down comes, you're gonna be up. So if you do decide to take them, make sure your next day, like, you don't have much to do, you don't have work or you don't have school or whatever you're doing. That way you have enough time to enjoy your night and not worry about doing something right up early the next day. The money spent on it, they can range probably like $25 to $40 an eighth, which would be 3.5 grams. And that's where the money starts to, come into play, is it's more expensive than marijuana, but it can be more expensive than alcohol as well. So this would be like no more than a once a week kind of thing. I was doing it once a week, and even that's a lot. They say to reset and to take it once every 2 or 3 months. So I don't know about that, but all I know is the higher the dosage, the higher it takes to get you going, the more you're going to be spending. So be careful with that as well. But one more thing is I felt better. Everything I saw, the whole experience, not every single time, all 30 times, but the majority of the experiences I had were really, really good with how I felt. I had a really great time. And I'd say I actually had more fun than I would ever have had with alcohol. So that is one thing to say and notice. Some of the things I saw while I did take the larger doses, 3 to 5 gram doses, I would actually see creatures or different things, shadows, moving on the ceilings, or I would see patterns of walls, or just different things that I saw while I was tripping. I would see things, and I was hallucinating when I did see those things. It was actually really cool and really fun to see. So some people notice scary experiences, and I never did. So I guess I'm lucky, or I just did it right, or maybe I'm a different person. I don't know. Every person is different on different drugs, on different alcohol, on different things. So the come down is just being tired, no headaches, no problems, no nothing the next day. That's what, in my experience. So one thing I want to leave with, though, is Tim Cook, the former CEO of Apple, said in his life, it was a positive life-changing experience when he took LSD, which is acid, and it's very similar to the compound makeup of psilocybin mushrooms. But one of like the best experiences he has ever had in his life was when he took LSD. So for someone to create what he created as a company and be as big of a person as he was, but to experiment on LSD when he was a kid, if LSD, good LSD or natural mushrooms were, a bad substance, then people like that would not be so successful in life. They would be in a different state of mind or messed up in the head or whatever you want to call it. But that's not what these drugs are doing, like especially with the new research that's coming out. They're starting to see health benefits of it. So for it to be scheduled number one in the scheduling for the DEA and how they scheduled the drugs, it's scheduled 1, which means there's no health benefits and they're highly addictive, or one of the other. But the thing is, they're not addictive. So, and if you do your own research, you'll find out that they are used to help get people off of addictions. For example, the person who created the AA meetings, he was an alcohol addict himself, and he started to create something that he thought would help people get out of their addictions and help them while they were suffering on their alcohol addictions. And towards the end of his life, before he died, he started experimenting on hallucinogens, for example, LSD. And I don't know if he tried the mushrooms or not, but after one time of taking it, he decided, oh my gosh, like, why would I ever drink again in my life? That's like the dumbest mistake I've ever made. So he self-reflected and realized it was an interesting substance to help him realize all the mistakes he had made taking alcohol, which actually kills people. So he wanted to implement what he learned and experimented into those AA meetings, but it never made it to the meetings. So that's one thing I do know with my own research. Mr. Jobs credited getting high with fueling his creativity. So when you take these psilocybin mushrooms, it uses your frontal lobe a lot more than you ever would. So if you look at the graphs online now, especially in the research articles, it'll show pictures of scans they did on the brain and like the lit up regions that the normal brain uses on a day-to-day basis. But when the person or the subject was on psilocybin mushrooms, their brain was lit up like all over, and the frontal lobe was what they were using most of all, a lot more than they would normally, which can, like, I can see why the deeper thinking comes into play, because you're thinking about much more than you would normally do. The default mode network DMN gets shut off, and there's new passages that get connected in your brain, so you can start thinking about things you never would have thought of before. So it's just an interesting substance. Phase 1, 2, and 3. They're natural. Psilocybin mushrooms grow in Florida naturally, and you can actually pick them. I'm not sure if you can consume them legally, but I know you can find them and possess them if you pick them out of the natural earth. They also grow in London, and I believe they grow in California too. So I'm sure they grow in many other places, but so far they are a natural substance. So you can even grow them in your own closet. But yeah, so I just wanted to have that interesting talk about psilocybin mushrooms, but I did not want to endorse buying them on the black market or taking them in a place where you probably shouldn't be taking them. So they say your first time should be in a natural setting where you're at a good time in your life, not a bad time. Because if you're going to be deeper thinking about all these things, or you're having a bad time in your life, that's all you're going to be thinking about are those bad things, and you're going to have a bad time. So anyway, that's all I got to say. And there's more to this story. There's more that I want to say, but I'm going to leave it at that since we're already at about 25 minutes. So there's my video for you.